The reflection in the craft of writing section of the HSC English exams is so important because it allows you to flaunt whatever you've just written. Good morning. Today I'm going to be going through some tips to help you ace those reflections in the craft of writing. I use this method for the craft of writing module C, but I also used it in the common module of extension English, and I'm sure it has a bunch of applications to whatever discursive, didactic or imaginative writing you may be doing. In case you're not familiar with the module C lingo yet, a discursive piece is a conversational piece that explores a few points, and a didactic piece is persuasive, with the goal of trying to persuade the audience of something, convince them of something. I'll note that this video focuses on the reflection on the craft of writing rather than the craft itself. So the craft being the actual writing of the creative, the didactic or the discursive text, and the reflection being the discussion of your writing that they may ask you to do after you write that. If you're looking for some advice just about the craft, so like the part A of module C, then I have another video which I can link to. You can actually prepare for the reflection a lot more than you can prepare for the crafted piece. So these are my tips to make sure you can use your reflection to flaunt everything that you wrote. First, let's think about preparing a structure for your reflection. So you can prepare content for your reflection. I'm not saying you can memorize the whole answer and the reflection, but there are things that you can be familiar with. In my video on craft, I explain the value of having adaptable ideas. So having some ideas for discursive texts, for creatives and didactives. Or a bunch of personal anecdotes, memories, and some topics that you're interested in. So you're using your versatile ideas for the craft part of Module C and your prescribed text for Module C to come up with an adaptable reflection. This technique is somewhat similar to the one that I use and that I teach for essay preparation, so I can link to that. You are writing this reflection at dot points and you don't need to memorize, you just need to be familiar with the concepts. I'm going to be referencing a sample reflection that I've written and I will link to that Google Doc below. So you get a question. First, you want to begin with a kind of intro. It can be a sentence or it can be a paragraph, depending on the question. All right, so let's look at an example. And here is the question. So part A reads, write an imaginative text that engages with the theme of qualitative experience. Draw from an extended metaphor in one text you have studied in any of your modules. And part B reads, identify which text, which extended metaphor, and explain your creative choices. Nice. So obviously in this video we're going to be looking at the part B. It's unusual that they would ask you to reference any text you've studied in any of your modules, because obviously we do have prescribed texts just for module C, but I mean, it's module C, they could give you anything. Let's have a look at the sample introduction and then unpack it. So, my imaginative piece, Haunted by the Lens, draws from Rohinton Mysteries' Ghost of Ferocia Bark, 1987, a text I studied in module C. Mystery's employment of the extended metaphor of a ghost as a vehicle to create and subsequently bridge cultural divides inspired my similar use of the camera lens extended metaphor. In his narrative, Mistry illuminates cultural dislocation in India, as well as his protagonist's struggle between tradition and modernity. Drawing from these themes and his creative choices, my piece explores the displacement of a Westerner, Australian, as she acclimatizes to super-modern China. The reflection needs to start with a kind of thesis sentence that introduces your text, it introduces the prescribed text, and also answers the question. So obviously you can prepare to introduce your text and the prescribed text, and on the day you'll be addressing the question, on the fly. I will note that they may not actually ask you about your prescribed text. So in that case, you have the option to just focus on your own stuff. Depending on how many marks it's worth, you may actually have a chance in this introduction section to have a look at the themes that you explore and the themes that your prescribed text explores. And you can see I've kind of done that in the sample. If the reflection is around 8 marks or less, or if you're running out of time, Don't worry about exploring the themes in the intro section, just dive right into the body. In terms of writing the body of the reflection, you need to be going into the exam with these adaptable ideas, aware of the variety of ways that those ideas have drawn from your prescribed text. You need to have adaptable ideas that draw on similar techniques to your prescribed text so you can have an informed reflection. These techniques could be, an extended metaphor like the one that we're looking at in this sample. It could be a motif, it could be the same use of setting or the same use of some key themes. You just got to be aware of the way they parallel each other. So in the likelihood that they will ask you to reflect, you have some content there. When you're curating content to write in part A, you should be informed by making sure you can do a quality reflection in part B. Have a variety of connections between your adaptable ideas and the prescribed text, so that way you have options depending on the question and you have just creative options on the day. Alright, let's have a look at the example. Mistry introduces his ghost extended metaphor as his protagonist Jacqueline struggles with a ghost that others mock her for believing in. This symbolic motif creates a situation in which her external conflict mirrors her internal conflict. She internally grapples with her cultural identity as a Goan Catholic and very dark skin colour within a light-skinned Parsi community in India, which alienates her just as much as her belief in ghosts. Parsi. I might be saying this wrong and I'm so sorry. I mostly wrote it and rarely read it aloud. Anyway, so you'll see in this sample that there are a few key quotes. So some can provide context, some can be worth analysis. So let's continue through. However, as her employer has her own experience with a ghost, Jacqueline describes how she pours a cup for me, listening to my ghost talk. She does not treat me like a servant all the time. Showing this metaphor soon becomes a bridge of connection. I similarly used a camera lens extended metaphor paired with the onomatopoeias of blip, ding, and click to symbolize my protagonist's feelings of dislocation. This motif and auditory imagery is effectively used to impress itself into the consciousness of my Australian audience, unacclimatized to such surveillance. However, I too undermine this supposedly invasive lens with non-threatening connotations. Within the story, the cameras greet them and blink awake, the personification subtly diffusing each intimidating lens. The comical subversion of a hostile guard archetype napping at his desk further reveals the motif as non-threatening, creating an internal transformation within my protagonist who finally asks her friend to take a video for when I'm back home, showing an acceptance and almost comfort within her modern society. If you want to make the most of this, feel free to have a look at the prescribed text, which I will link to, and the whole imaginative, just to provide some context. In the body, you'll see you're breaking down the reflection question and supporting it with analysis from your prescribed text and analysis from your own text. Go heavier on the analysis on your own text. In this particular one, there's probably too much on the prescribed text, but it kind of depends on the question and how you're approaching your answer. As you can see in this one, I've split it up between a paragraph on the prescribed, a paragraph on my own. I'll link to another sample, module C, that I've written, in which I have done prescribed and my own in a paragraph, and then a second paragraph prescribed in my own. So there's a bunch of ways of setting it up, but basically you want to have a bit of analysis from both and make sure you are analysing yourself a bit more. It might feel weird to analyse yourself, but remember, in this context, you are the author. Alright, so we're having a look at closing off the reflection. This just needs to succinctly answer the question, and if the question specifies, show how your text draws from the prescribed text. Let's have a look at the example. Learning from Mistry's use of a transformative extended metaphor, I have engaged my audience with an imaginative piece which encapsulates cultural pluralism in an increasingly modern society. So that is an overview of the kind of things that you can prepare for your reflection. And feel free to check out the links down below for a bit of context and a few more examples. Now we've looked at what and how to prepare, my last piece of advice is practice tackling the questions. Module C is so much about practice, much more than any of the other modules. The more practice you have adapting your ideas to the question and practicing time management, the better you'll perform. I have a lot more specific advice about how to practice adapting your answer to the question and how to stay on top of time management in my other video. So these are my tips for writing reflections in Module C, the craft of writing. Let me know if you have any other good pieces of advice, and I hope this helped.